Great. So thank you for coming out tonight. Truly, the first of the year is, you are to be commended to be joining us so soon. Basically, what I'd like to ask, beyond some of the questions that have already been asked, is how many of you do not yet have a native plant in your garden? Okay, great. Excellent. And then how many of you have played with California native plants in your garden for a year or more? Wonderful. Is there anyone here doing a native garden for somebody else, or you're a pro, or you're just great? Excellent. Then I assume that maybe you're here because you would like to start doing your own garden or expand upon it. How many of you are doing just a small portion, like a little section? How many, okay. How many front yard or backyard? How many of the whole thing would really like to get the whole thing squared away? Okay, good. I'm asking because this will help as we talk through these slides. Over here on the board is a questionnaire that I give out to people that I do gardens for. It's extensive because I really want people to think about things that they may not have considered just in their wish list. We all have this wish list. Oh, looking out at your yard, oh, I really want this, or oh my gosh, I wish I could do that. But until we actually sit down and start really brainstorming or looking through magazines and that kind of stuff, then we don't get tickled for different ideas. So afterwards, if you like, you can look through there. Maybe there's something that will remind you of something that, oh yes, I wish I could have this or that. The handouts tonight, one of them, as you see, is a pretty blank list, and that's for your scribbles, design goals, or a design program. In the industry, it's called a design program, but that's confusing sometimes, so just figure design goals. Broken down very simply, but I use that a lot, and I fill this in for people I talk to, or even when I'm playing in my own yard. And then the other list is a plant list for the slides tonight, and you'll notice on the left-hand side of the column is the is the slide number, and down in the right-hand corner of the slide, hopefully you can see it all right, that is the slide number that goes along with those plants. And there should be space for you to squiggle notes on. I don't know why I didn't get them printed with all the grid lines, so sorry about that. And then possibly you also got a list front and back of different nurseries and books and websites and that sort of thing to help you research further. It's not completely updated, but it's a good start. So tonight, what you want to do in your California native plant garden, and that's the very first step. It's just like if you're going to do a financial plan, or you're going to build a house, or whatever, to make a good plan first. It doesn't have to be set in concrete at all, but it's a place to start. And truly, gardens are never done. So you can build on this. You can just feel free not to feel like I have to make the best plan in the world so that I don't screw up or something like that. No, this is it's a good guidepost for you. Okay. Here, it's leap year. A great time to leap forward into your new garden. So we want a native plant garden. We've heard great things about them, but where do we begin? And this is specifically the design program, the design goals. This is a path. We're going to walk along a path tonight to get you started. Okay, just a note about plant names. As you notice on your plant list, I have listed the botanic name first, and then the common name. And the botanical name is often whatever. it's Latin, it's Greek, they're not dead languages, yet they're very hard to pronounce, and they're the base of our language, but you don't have to pronounce them correctly. As Arvind has said before, is the correct way to pronounce a botanical name is confidently and strongly. No one will ever know the difference. So tomato, tomato, whichever way you'd like to do, but the common name is often floating around in the universe somewhere, but when you go to buy a plant or you go up to the California Native Plant Nursery at Hidden Villa, you want to look for the exact botanical name. If you go for a common name, you may not get the plant that you saw on this screen that you said, I want that plant. So that's why we've got both names going, and
they're changing.
I'm sorry?
And they're changing.
And they're changing, yes. Oh. I know, what is your canvas and where is it? So what is your canvas? What we just asked was, are you just trying to do a little corner of your yard? Are you looking at just the front yard, just the backyard, the whole thing? Would you like to do it in phases? So that, okay, right now all I can deal with is this little corner back by the barbecue. So recognizing that, you set your parameters. And then also, no site is too small or too large. Sometimes people think, oh gosh, I really want to do my own yard, I don't want to pay anybody for it, but I'm daunted by my whole property. So instead, just break it down and know that over several years, over your lifetime if you like, to just take it step by step. Then you want to know where you can. How many have heard about Mediterranean climate? And what this is summers are dry, winters are cool and wet. Well, ours is cool so far, and hopefully we'll get wetter this year. But this kind of climate only occurs in 5 locations around the Earth. California coast, or the west coast of North America, the west coast of South America, just in that latitude in Chile. And you'll notice all of these places are in the same latitude or matching latitudes on the face of the Earth. In the certain areas in the Mediterranean region, the South African coast there, and the coast of Australia, western coast of Australia. All of these areas experience this kind of climate, and it makes a complete difference as far as what plants do the best. And so the plants we're looking for, so that they naturally grow beautifully with this climate without too much extra help, utilizing too many resources, are plants that are native or also occur in Mediterranean climate type places. So of course tonight, or this whole series, is about native plants. And I just had my eyes tested, and I'm getting new glasses. So I thought I'd test my eyes again. Best time to plant California native plants is basically in the cool, wet time, October through March. It's okay to practice or plant throughout the rest of the year, except really stay away from July and August. And as most of you know, the reason for that is you want them to get their roots established as best as possible before the dry season starts, so you don't have to water them to keep them alive so much. Okay, so knowing where you are, on the broad scale, this is a Mediterranean climate, and in future talks they'll be talking about more localizing. Are you in a certain section with certain soils or certain climate changes, fog belt, that sort of thing. But this is just narrowing you down on the general overview of things to think about as you're designing your garden. So I'd like to also mention about sustainable landscaping. This is a term that probably a lot of you have heard bantered around, especially lately. More and more we're concerned about the environment. More and more we're concerned about what we do to our yards, what things we apply to the soils, what things we apply to the plants to keep them healthy, and how we actually build our landscapes. So the actual components of sustainable landscaping include A sustainable landscape does not overuse our natural resources, does not excessively pollute our environment, contributes to the health of our natural world, does not sacrifice beauty and economy, and helps ensure the planet for our children. So a garden like this, it looks very lush, doesn't it? And oftentimes people will come and say, I want a lush garden. Well, in California, sometimes we think the hills are brown. So how can you have a lush garden? But here's an example of, as you're thinking about how you want your garden to look, it's a natural lushness. This is a springtime shot, and in the fall and the winter or late summer, it looks a little bit different. But there's still certain plants that are evergreen, that are in the shade, and so they don't dry out easily. And where there are blooms that even though the blooms are down, but the plant itself still looks very nice throughout the whole year. So you can still have a wonderful, beautiful garden, but practice sustainable landscaping ethics. Number 7, are we on number 7? Yay. And California native plants, here I am just preaching to the choir probably, but can use less water than traditional garden plants. There are native plants which you know come from a more moist area, whether it's along stream sides or it's up in the redwood area where there's a lot of fog drip. But in general, in our location here, most of them can use less water than traditional garden plants. Plants naturally clean the air. Plants take in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. They use less or no chemical-based fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, create less green waste, which is if you have to shear a plant a lot or trim it a lot, and that all goes to the landfill, which gets packed down and then emits methane gas. So native plants you can just let naturally grow and trim slightly if you want to, and create a healthy habitat. You can design to help rebalance the earth. This is a summertime, on the left-hand side, summertime bloom. A time when there are a lot of things that, with a lot of nutrition, just are not available to critters in the late summer. But we have native plants that are wonderful, beautiful, and very, very nutritious at that time when the critters need them. This is a little meadow. So with all these plants, they attract the critters that we're looking for to create a wonderful environment, otherwise known as a habitat garden. So if you want a native garden, you're automatically going to have a habitat garden. I omitted having that as a question of, would you like a habitat garden? Because here you are wanting native plants, and you will get it whether you want it or not. But what is a habitat garden? We hear talk about that, and it's almost as if we think we need to design it. We need to create it. But if you use the right combination of things, it's like if you build it, they will come. So it's a landscape that recreates a natural ecosystem specific to the area in which it is located. The first component is water. It provides basic survival needs for many species of wildlife year-round. And the second component is food, whether it's nectar or seed, etc. So in the summer, late summer, Solidago is blooming, and we can have, that plant is alive with activity of wildlife. And then in the spring is the California aster, a beautiful plant, rambunctious, but butterflies are highly attracted to it because they can land on the flat surface of the bloom. Third component is shelter. This is a little hummingbird nest. If you've ever seen them, they're about this big around. They're just so cute. But plants, any kind of plants, will create this third component of shelter. But whether it's a healthy shelter, it doesn't have a lot of fungus because it's planted in the wrong place and that sort of thing. native plants can naturally be healthy because they come from our location. Also, the Habitat Garden will create a complete cycle of the soil food web that includes from the plants, the soil, and the air itself. So a Habitat Garden attracts local wildlife for observation and study, providing a distinct educational opportunity for now and toward the future. So the first thing you want to do, or second thing I guess it is, because you've already decided what section, how much of your garden you want to do, and where you are, is you want to create or fine-tune your garden wish list. Whether it's, I want a garden feature, or we'd like a quiet sitting area, or I would like to design by plant community. Who here has heard of California plant communities? Great, many, many of you. And basically what that refers to is, you know the saying, birds of a feather flock together? Well, in this case, plants that like the same conditions tend to grow in the same locations naturally. And if I wanted to have the plant community of chaparral in my garden, because my location is a dry, hot, sloped, difficult place, then I can choose plants from naturally occurring from the chaparral community, and they will thrive. So there will be another talk, I don't know which one it is, but someone is going to be talking about plant communities and going further in detail as far as describing which plants go in which communities. The 7 major communities are listed here. Alpine and desert actually apply to, obviously, the Sierra Nevada mountains and then the 2 desert areas that we have. And they're not considered in the California Floristic Province specifically, but they are in California state, the political borders. So that's why we include them in the 7 major California plant communities. But the chaparral, coastal scrub, grassland, woodland, and forest can be further broken down into coniferous forests, mixed evergreen forests, grass woodland, or many different delineations, but those are the main ones that you can kind of get an idea by their description what kind of climate, what kind of conditions they're in. So you can start thinking about, where do I live? Am I bayside? Am I on the coast? Am I in a grassland? Do I see a bunch of oaks, but then there's a lot of grasses on the slope? You can start defining your location in that way. Can I get interest in all seasons? Sometimes people request, I want color in every season. Well, does that mean you want bloom in every season? Does that mean I have to get out the pansies and the hothouse flowers? Actually, in California natives, there is usually something blooming at every single month of the year, every single season of the year. They're just not the hot pinks and the fluorescent yellows all year long. There are things like the buckeye doesn't bloom at that time, but that's the seed. But at the same time that this has seed, our coyote bush has its little white flowers. So every single season of the year, you can have something blooming if you like. But even if it's not blooming, you can get some awesome, I think what Sherry mentioned, the bark, the seeds, all sorts of parts of the plant that are interesting. This Dudleya is a succulent, and there are a good number of California native succulents, but they are not, when we're talking succulents, we're not talking cacti. So we wouldn't want to put these succulents that belong to the coastal scrub community in the hot sun all day long because they're not cacti. But they're wonderful container plants, and they love partial sun, and in the spring they have these incredible flowers that stalk up and have a great red color to them. So something else you might want to think about of defining what you want to do in your garden. Can I have an almost no water garden? Sure. This is an extreme case on the left-hand side. It's actually a meditation labyrinth. No water there. It's under a big oak in Palo Alto. And all around it are just planting beds of native plants. But how to conserve the most water and have a really different looking garden, the homeowner had gone up to Sonoma, because we were taking out a lawn, basically is what we did. We shrunk the lawn first, and then didn't know what to do with the rest of the lawn because the kids wanted to keep the lawn there, but it was gobbling all this water. So the homeowner went up to Sonoma and did a bunch of meditation, drank a bunch of wine, and she came home and she says, I know what I'd like to do with my lawn. I'd like to turn it into a labyrinth. So you don't have to go that far necessarily as far as extreme, but still, as you're looking at pictures or you're thinking of ideas, is what would fit your needs, what would fit your taste, and what would fit your activities. What kind of things do you want to do when you're in the garden? They also want a place for entertainment. So back towards the back there, around the pool, there's chairs and tables and umbrellas. So each of these aspects fit the need of the person who lives here. Can I screen passersby with the least blockage of views? You can create a lot of interesting things between plants and structures so that you maybe your screening is not opaque, but just enough so that the eye is diverted from the busy street that it is. People are walking on the street all the time as well as driving, because there's a view to Mount Diablo, as you can see right through that little tor structure. So it is quite busy, but just enough between the deer grass, which gets this high with its awns, and the Fremontodendron, which it's a smaller growing one, but it'll eventually get up about 4 feet high. And the structure here, you can play between the plants as well as any kind of foil that you want to put in. Once again, would love to have color in all seasons. This is the same house in spring and in fall. The choice of your plants, as you get to know native plants, or you already know some, and you've watched them throughout the seasons, what they look like color-wise, then knowing that, I don't have my pointer here, but knowing that this Arctostaphylos right up here is going to look like this in the fall, but in the early spring it's going to have little white flowers. Can help you match it with blue penstemon versus in the fall, this wouldn't look so good, I think, with blue, so the penstemon is not blooming at that time of year. So instead you have the dynamic reds with the grape and the strong white, still white pink, still of the buckwheat, the California buckwheat, which is a phenomenal plant. So you can play with your colors as well, seasonally, of what the plant actually does. You might want to start, if you know Excel at all, and are not confused by all the new versions, you can even start your own plant list of the name of the plant, how big it can get, what kind of water it likes, what kind of light it likes, and then what I've done actually is create a column for each month, what color, even though Excel colors are very limited, But basically I'll be able to see throughout the year it's going to be green during these months, it's going to be deciduous during those months, and when it's blooming it's going to be this color. So it helps me choose the plants and scroll through each season so I can see, oh, you know, I better not plant that with that because I don't think I like that color combination. You will also then have created your own database for your garden. And as you add plants or plants die or something, then you'll keep it up to you can keep it up to date, and it's a fun thing to do. Also coordinating, thinking about your architecture. There's so many different styles between the modern Eichler or many different types of styles. And so this one, an updated craftsman, really wanted, I felt, a bold statement in his plant choices. And so that's what we did in how we set them and how we place them for their effect. So think in that way too. If you have a modern looking house or Eichler looking house, you can be really clean and simple. If you have a Victorian house in some way, you can have that kind of more exuberance or the I don't want to say frilliness, but there's a lot more detail in Victorian style. You've all heard the term form follows function, but also function can follow form. So the form of the low water that I want a low water meadow. Well, here's a low water meadow, and it's low care. So the form of the meadow follows the function of low water. This gets weed whacked twice a year. And in the summertime it does look a bit brownish, but that's one of the times we weed whack it. And many of the plants within here start coming right after that, as soon as it gets whacked down about 6 inches high. Excuse me. Then function follows form. So the function, what we're looking for is to cover an old fence that the homeowner really didn't want to spend the money to replace. So we planted a native morning glory, and of course the form of the morning glory just draped completely as we strung it up, and then it just draped there to hide the ratty fence. More design terms: color, texture, form. You can think about plants as you already know them or you meet them new. What is their color? What is their texture? And what is their form? And you can put those and combine those together to effects that are pleasing to you. There is no such thing as bad design. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, and it's your garden. And so you can play, or you can make choices that are totally pleasing to you. And a lot of times there'll be a discovery that, wow, that goes well together. I didn't realize that it would. And it's very satisfying. In this day and age, I think we need lots of things to make us feel happy and satisfied. So that's what will happen as you play with these things. The far left is a springtime, just a little tiny planting area about 1.5 feet wide between the house and the blacktop walkway. And yet that combination brightens up the blacktop. And usually you would think, oh, replace the blacktop because it's blacktop. But the homeowner didn't want to do that. And so how do we pretty it up, or how do we make it pleasing so you focus on the plants? To plant interesting combinations of these strawberries and coral bells, and within there's some iris and some juncus as well. Just can't see it there. And then the combination of strawberries with Arctostaphylos, wow, it's like a tapestry. And then this right-hand picture is actually up in Tilden Botanical, Regional Parks Botanical Garden in Tilden Park, which reminds me, the fun thing about winning one of these is that this issue covers not all, but many of the botanical gardens in California that have California native plants. There are 3 of them that have solely native plants: the Regional Parks Botanic Garden, Tilden Park in Berkeley, the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, and Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden down in Claremont, California. But there's beautiful photos and descriptions of the entire gardens, and so whenever you're taking a trip, this would be a great handy book to bring with you, or journal to bring with you to explore. So this picture on the right is at Tilden Botanical Garden, just going across a bridge. It's a very nice, wet, moist area. But the combination of the columbine and a fern, I don't know which one it is. Somebody ID from a distant view?
Giant chain fern.
I'm sorry?
Giant chain fern.
Giant chain fern. It very well could be. Very, very well could be. It's big enough, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, then also the concepts: do you want sound? Do you want smell? Do you want touch, or the softness, or the ticklish aspect of plants? The sound you can get because of the wildlife that visit, the bees and the bugs, and the birds. Or you can also get it if you have a windy area. Sometimes, depending upon the grass that you plant, you can get some nice sounds from the wind. Or even a small tree like a redbud, if it can withstand the wind, then sometimes even the rattling of the seed pods of the redbud is a very interesting sound. Smell, the woolly blue curls, if you don't kill them, the fragrance is so sweet, it's so pleasant, kind of like bubble gum, but not sicky, not sickening like bubblegum, but just a really sweetness. It has a sweetness to it. And there are many, many, many native plants that have a great fragrance. And touch, the ground cover, right under here in this right-hand picture, is native dichondra, Dichondra donnelliana. It occurs across the United States, but it is native to here, and it's very soft. You can use it as a replacement to a lawn. It loves sun. It can take a little bit of water. But I will tell you, in the summertime, it likes to rest for a little bit. So it's a good idea to plant it with some other things around it so that you don't notice so much it needs to die back a little bit. Nevertheless, it's a fun place for kids to run around in and roll around in.
How tall is it?
It's like that. And once if it likes your garden, it spreads all over the place, but it's beautiful. It's not like, oh God, it's spreading and I don't like it. It's really pretty when it spreads. And it's just fluffy and kind of like a bunny rabbits or something. So I highly recommend it. If it doesn't like where it is, it'll try to move someplace else. So, considerations. Do you have kids? Or are there kids that visit and don't go home before you can get them out of your garden? Do you have some non-natives that you just really don't want to get rid of? Sometimes people feel like, oh, I have to only plant natives now because I have to be so considerate of the environment. But that's really not true. In this right-hand garden, there were roses that were handed down in the family, and so we naturally wanted to keep them. Yes, they're high water. Yes, this Lepichinia fragrans, that's the most right side plant, is a drought tolerant and prefers dryness. But the grape over the arbor prefers more moisture. So the way we work the irrigation is that we put more water on the areas, and we dripped all this, on the plants that preferred more water, but between the Italian cypress and the Lepichinia, which prefer less water, we were able to control how much all the plants got in that way. So, do we need space to entertain? Are my pets a problem? Sometimes dogs like to dig, cats like to scratch, and chickens like to eat soft plants. One of these homes had chickens, and we planted the entryway in a very florific manner, a lot of fluffiness. And when they did not have their chickens caged, then we totally lost the whole planting. So we had to mitigate in that way. And so if you have pets who might like to run around in your garden, then you have to think about where do you place the plants that you don't want them to get to, or that they may actually damage. Do I want edibles? Would I like to do some planter boxes? Or do I want fruit trees? In this garden, on the right-hand side, as you see, vegetable planter boxes, along with some fruit trees, an olive tree, and some monardella. There's also some caryxes along the pathway there. So a big mix of things. And this is actually the front yard, because the neighborhood is so friendly that they wanted, we kind of made it a plaza so that they could share the vegetables, people could come visit. There's a dog park, as you see that piece of lawn over to the left. So we screened from the dog park, but nevertheless, they still wanted to be able to invite the neighbors in to their front yard and share the bounty of the garden. But in the backyard, it's more private. So it seems like that might be an opposite way to do it, but in your circumstance, something like that, or just thinking a little bit differently, can create a fully usable yard, where you don't just have to have a front yard that's a showcase and you don't do anything in the front yard, but you just do everything in the backyard. You could either flip it around or mix it up. Also, what paving materials would you like to use? What kind of walls you might need, or retaining walls, or different types of things that create the rest of your garden. There are ways to use materials that are more local, or at least less taxing on our environment. Most of you have heard of urbanite, broken up concrete. They've given it a fancy name. So broken up concrete is now called urbanite. And in truth, it can be used in many interesting ways. And you can create a retaining wall, and if you grow plants into it and they grow over and tumble down, only you will know that it is old busted concrete. So to, again, think outside the garden fence for new and different ways to design the hardscape. Also amenities, meaning the water feature, the bench, that type of thing. Are there other things too that you can add into your garden that enhance the plants? One of the speakers for not part of the series, but Pete Villiers with ferns. He's going to be talking about ferns, right? And he is like a super expert on making beautiful container plantings. And there are so many native plants that go well in containers. So you can use your natives in the containers. In this case, of course, it's a water feature, the container is, but there would be ways to do that too. Okay. 22. Okay, now I wanted you to dream first. But now it's time to think about maybe there's some limitations. Maybe there's some situations that I need to adjust my dreams, or I can expand my dreams even further because I remembered that I've got this certain circumstance on my property. So let's take inventory of your garden, of your property. You can think about what you want to keep and what you might want to discard. In the left-hand photo, what was kept was a very interesting geometric porch fence railing. What was removed were the dead plants and the brick planter box. Kind of an obvious choice, but in your garden, maybe you haven't had time to think about it, or maybe you thought about it so much you can't wait to get rid of things. But sometimes if you take a slow walk around your garden, you can remember or realize, this really isn't going to work for what I want to do. And then if you have circumstances that look like they're limiting, but they may actually be an opportunity to create something like terracing or planter rounds that are actual planter boxes with steps through them. This is a slope, a grassland slope. And so there could be lots of things that could be done. You could even create an area where kids can roll down, as well as have your flower areas or your trees, putting in your trees. So take a look at the challenges. Losing the lawn, or winning the weed war. This little right-hand house in Menlo Park, the homeowner was fighting vigorously to win the weed war, and needed to overlap. And so finally that was completed, and it has actually turned into a really, really nice yard. Still, usually, just my experience, and maybe you have other experience, but after you create a garden, within the first year, or for the first year at least, those real pernicious weeds, the ones with the roots that are like this long, they will still try to come up. And so you just keep battling and digging. Second year, fewer and fewer. Third year, wow, very few come up. It's the same thing with oxalis, actually. So that's just been my experience. Consider naturally occurring conditions. What kind of earth, soil that you have. Are you in a fire-prone area, possibly? How windy is your site? Because the plant that you love may not love the wind. And then water. How much rain do you get in your location? In the Bay Area, it can differ. It was raining up in San Francisco the other day, and I drove down here, and whoa, wait a minute, where's the moisture? So your situation where you are in our small area can be a lot different. And then consider other influences. Life in the soil, and I don't just mean the good mycorrhizae, which this is a picture of, but I mean things like gophers and moles and dogs that dig. Wildlife. Some of you probably live in thoroughfares where deer love to meander. You may, this is the Topanga Canyon fire. Steve, what's his name, from Southern California, CNPS, sent me this picture, anyway, that year, the Topanga Canyon fire. And can you imagine if you live in the East Bay? This is a real challenge. And then, of course, there's human impact. If you live close to a freeway, or if you, I don't know, there's many different conditions that are not natural occurrences necessarily, but to take into consideration. Do you have people who walk their dogs in your neighborhood, and the dogs love to come into your garden and not pick up after themselves? Continue your assessment. all the way to asking your neighbors if you can come up into their top floor bedroom, and take a picture of your property as if they were looking onto your property. So this left-hand picture, that's what we did, because the light green house, it was the client property, and that side of the house is where she wanted to build a hot tub. And she loves to run around freely. So we purposely asked the very nice neighbors, and they were very kind to let us do this, just to make sure that we had the trellis and the screens, the roll-down screens, placed properly. Also, something I found out once, I made this great planting plan, and I forgot to note where the power pole and the utilities were. And we went to plant up, and I went, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? So make note of all the different aspects on your property that may affect where you want to put your favorite plant. So discover bad soil and bad invasive plants. Do you remember the picture of the property that had the planter boxes and the fruit trees and the water feature and the bench next to the dog park? That's what that front yard looked like beforehand. So if you've got part of your yard that looks like this, then you can do it. It's very possible to make it into a much more welcoming site. Also, take photos. You may have done this already, but take photos from inside your house to the views that you want to look at. Sometimes you say, I want a water feature, but you get inside the house and you can't see it, or you can't hear it, and you really wanted to be able to hear it. So if you take consideration from, even though in California we can live outside a lot, but there are those months where it's too cold or too wet to go outside, or you just don't have time. So make those considerations too, make note of that. Also, if you take photos either from inside the house or around your property of taking before photos, they're really fun to look at after you've planted up your garden. What will it cost? The ultimate question. Well, it'll cost you money. But you can navigate that. You can plan for that. You can go price out materials and plants and that sort of thing and make your budget. Use that Excel spreadsheet or use that piece of paper. It also will cost you time. But that's sometimes the fun of it. I know I can relieve a lot of stress if I go play in my garden. And you can phase your project so that you don't get overwhelmed. And it will also cost you, the good thing, you will render your heart toward your garden, and you will be happy you did, because it will reward you amazingly. So that is tending your garden. Once you've planted things or as you're playing with different plants, your heart will become totally involved, and you will spend your feelings, but you'll be happy because of it. So one of my favorite quotes from a well-known mid-century landscape architect, when your garden is finished, I hope it will be more beautiful than you anticipated, require less care than you had expected, and have cost only a little more than you had planned. So next time, February 2nd, will be soils, sites, and California native plants. So David Phelps will delve further into your property, your site, and the choice of plants. So thank you. Are there any questions? Great.
Questions for Peggy. Come on, I know we have questions.
How do you deal with gophers?
Okay. Very good one. Actually, a lot of times we use, depending upon the size of the plant, we use gopher cages. You can buy them ready-made. Basically what it is chicken wire that's fairly small, and ready-made, they're clamped together on the sides and folded on the bottom, and you have to rip them apart, and you have to put the plant in, and you put it in the ground like that. But you should also be aware to get enough extra chicken wire to bend over the top of that hole right up to the neck of the plant, because gophers have become very smart. They are very smart, but now what they do, they get foiled, they can't get to the roots this way, and they will actually climb up and jump into the basket and start eating your plant. So the other way to build or to make gopher cages is yourself. Just buy the chicken wire. It's a lot cheaper, and it takes 10 snips, and you have to clamp it together, but they are cheaper and they're easier to manipulate. You can also use some different products that are they don't kill the gophers, but they deter them. But they quickly figure it out and they come back. It's really, really hard. Kill them. Jean says kill them. Yeah, it's really hard. And moles are really hard too. So it's a constant battle. Yes.
I'd like to follow up on the gopher cage, having made a lot of them myself. One of the keys is use a smaller chicken wire, 1/2 inch. Most common chicken wire is 1 inch. The babies go through it.
There you go. 1/2 inch chicken wire, no bigger.
The other thing that if you don't want the cover over the top, if you have about 2 to 3 inches of a curl over the top and down, they'll go up, and then they'll hit that, and then they won't be able to jump in. But you have to keep it above ground level with very dry mulch on top. Otherwise, if there's a little dirt on top, they'll go over the top of just about everything.
There we go. Did everyone hear that? So actually we would love a diagram to be able to put up on. But basically to deter the gophers by curving over the actual chicken wire, so that they climb up to try to get over, but they can't, and then they can't figure it out.
It has to go up and back down. Yeah.
So is that like maybe about a 2-inch radius or a 1-inch radius?
About 2 inches. 1 inch would be a little bit too small. They might figure a way to get out over the back of it. I live next to a wild area. And the other thing about deterring gophers, in a good season, gophers in California breed 4 times. In a bad season, they breed twice. They're not colonial like rats or mice. The mother kicks them out as soon as they're weaned. They have to go find new open spaces. So if you've killed all yours in your yard, what have you got? You got an empty condo for gophers.
Yeah.
So you might want to break down the old growth.
Yes, Jean.
Worked with Magic at Stanford planting acorns for regeneration of oak forest. And what they recommended and what we did was put a basket under the acorns and then put another basket over the top and wired them together so that the little acorns would have a chance to get sturdy enough to withstand that. I think the top basket was maybe 18 inches and the one underneath was about the same. We had to dig holes.
So that's what all those little basket.
I don't know if they're still there.
Great. Good. This is great. There were some hands over here, I think. Yes.
Is the diachondral nitrogen fixing like clover?
Yes. Is it? Yeah. Yes.
So if I had some dichondra that just found its way into an area that was bark and stuff, should I assume that that's a native dichondra? Because I don't see it anywhere else near our neighbors.
Yeah, no, because there's been so much that's sold in nurseries that you can assume it is not native, unfortunately. You would have to collect it during the flower time and then be able to key it out. It's the same thing. There's some oxalis, not the yellow oxalis, but there's an oxalis that actually looks like our native oxalis, but it's not rhizominous, and so, but it looks like it. So it's part of the horticultural trade, and unfortunately, you get all excited, right? It's like, oh wow, maybe this is native, but probably not. Great. Well, thank you immensely, and happy gardening.
Well,